The Edgar Cayce Handbook for Creating Your Future by Mark Thurston and Christopher Favel. Principle 3. God is living, active, and responsive. God is dead, or so Friedrich Nietzsche announced in the late 19th century. In the 1930s, Nietzsche's claim inspired a whole movement led by writers, artists, and philosophers who called themselves existentialists. According to these followers, we have no help beyond our own individual God effort. God, if ever there was such a deity long ago, departed or died. But doesn't something in your soul react to this sort of cynicism? If you look carefully at your life, you'll see evidence at the opposite point of view. God is alive, and that's much more complex than simply admitting that God exists. Rocks exists. So do the stars. Both may even be alive in some way, but they also seem distant, cold, and uninvolved with us. The world is full of people who believe in God, yet their concept leaves no room for intimacy and a direct relationship with a living force. For example, some people imagine God to be an all-powerful and changeless force for right and good. Others suppose that God is to be a remote parent, with a certain unbendable expectations. Perhaps you catch yourself occasionally believing that there is some sort of God, but missing some other aspects, some other qualities. But when we think of God, some of the qualities that come to mind that characterize might be vital, dynamic, active, responsive. And these might be words that you would use to describe yourself on any given day. So God is responsive to you and active in your life. These two features were especially important in the way that Edgar Cayce's readings describe God, responsive to individual needs and active in human affairs. You can have interactions with the divine forces and directly encounter the sacred in your own life. As Cayce told one man who dreamed of the deity as a businessman, this is a God who is alive in daily affairs, someone you can do business with. To better understand the mysteries of life, recognize that a living God is aware of and concerned about your needs and difficulties. Jesus said as much when he promised that even the hairs of your head are all counted, and that God calleth his own sheep by name and leads them out, John 10:3. But this vital dynamic God is never satisfied simply to be sympathetic. The creative forces take initiatives, reaching out to all of humanity, as well as to individuals like you, on a regular basis. Events and situations arise that can be understood as divine initiatives in your life. As Dr. Harmon Brough put it, God is loose in the world, stirring up loving mischief. So what kind of image of God might you create? Not a superhuman being, certainly, but still a creative force with which you can have a personal relationship. God is not a person, yet is very personal. The Creator is a friend and constant companion, a source of guidance, support, and encouragement through all the changing currents of life. An intimate relationship is perhaps exactly what the creative spark or desire for life is in you. How can you begin to cultivate that spirited alliance with God? The first step is to believe that it's possible. So how can you prove God? What's the evidence that a living God is active and responsive? It's a fair question. And it comes from two sources: the experiences that we go through that come as gifts, and at times you may glimpse some confirmation without necessarily expecting anything. These situations usually arise amidst great difficulty. So, for example, a period of great, deep discouragement is where you might have unexpectedly felt, even for just a moment, that life is good and purposeful. A second source of evidence may come from your own willingness to give God a try. In other words, medicine cannot be proved effective unless and until it's swallowed. And then it's proved only if and when it improves your health. So in the same way, God can be made manifest through an initial step of faith by your acting as if God were within you, sharing your joys, your sorrows, lending support and guidance. Cayce's readings often assign skeptical people to a task to act as if some proposition were true, to give an idea a chance by temporarily assuming its validity and watching for results. Propositions based on truth will hold up to this kind of test. They'll yield surprising results. In light of this, you might try, assuming that God is, in fact, alive, active, and responsive, and then live your life for some time guided by that point of view. Many people like you have eventually found proof enough of the truth in this way. Of course, no one can prove or disprove God empirically. No argument or laboratory test can unequivocally nail down the answer to this ultimate question. But just as you experience your own consciousness, your own sense of being, you can personally encounter the reality and abiding presence of the creative force. You merely have to be willing to take the first step. This process is described in a folk song that was popularized by the Kingston Trio. The song is about a dusty well, a bottle of water, and a note by a mysterious desert Pete. In the song, a man is lost in the desert without water, and he stumbles onto an old water pump. He tries the pump, but it produces no water. Discouraged, he sits down under a tree, finds a bottle of water with an attached note. All one has to do is pour it down the well, like crazy, and you'll get all the water that you can drink. Well, of course, the man is torn. He wants desperately to drink the water he has in hand rather than pour it down a well that's bone dry. But he finally chooses to take the step of faith, and of course he succeeds in finding water and leaves the bottle for the next traveler. Like the person in the song, sometimes we're just so often too thirsty for the answers but doubtful about the existence of a bountiful source of relief. But we can find only by giving something first. So what we are here to give is the benefit of the doubt. We have to say, I'm going to believe that God is aware of me and cares about me, and I'm going to let that belief influence my attitudes and actions, and I'm going to try out God. What does God promise? As you try out God, however, it's important to guard against the very human tendency to say, God, give me this, and then I'll believe you. During war, don't some people pray for God to help defeat the enemy? Don't some people pray to be delivered from drought, flood, bank failures? And then when we suffer life's whammies, how do we reconcile our failed prayers with the belief in a loving and responsive God? Mythologist Joseph Campbell points out that no authentic religions promise us deliverance from suffering. They will, however, instruct us on how to suffer purposefully. They'll show us how to find strength and spiritual support in our suffering, and they'll promise us inner peace in the midst of suffering. But they won't promise us an escape. Suffering is a part of life, and if we ask the Creator to prove its own existence by protecting us from suffering, we are misunderstanding the nature of life and the creative power that lies within test and trial. A fair question then is, what good is God? Why should I be concerned about God one way or the other? If it's true that God is, or the creative force is the source and essence of all life, then God is also the essence and source of your life and mine. God is life itself. In other words, God isn't like the chairman of the board or the president of the company who may not even know you exist. Rather, God is like the blood flowing in your veins, or the air that you breathe, or the orchestrator of your dreams at night. The creative force is immanent. It is present in all of your experiences. As the psalmist says, if I take the wings in the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. Or as Jesus says, yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. God not only is aware of and concerned about you, but also is active and working in your life. Jesus tells us the parable of the lost sheep in Matthew 18:12. If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one gets lost, the shepherd will leave the 99 and go in search of the one that is lost. God, or the universal consciousness, or the creative force, initiates relationships with us. If we learn to watch and observe carefully, we can see evidence of this in our own experience. Have you ever wrestled with a particular issue in life only to find yourself accidentally meeting someone who not only understands your situation or concern, but actually has advice or information that is just what you need at that moment? Perhaps you've had a dream about a friend or a relative in which the person seemed distressed or in need, and then later, when you called or visited that person, you discovered that you were really needed at that particular moment. Or maybe you just stumble onto a book or a magazine article that leads you to a whole new area of interest or activity. Such experiences may be seen as God or the universe extending a helping hand through coincidence, synchronicities. Through these encounters with people or ideas may seem accidental, but have an impact on your life that is anything but trivial. You can think of these examples as of the grace of God or the gracefulness of a caring universe. Carl Jung used the term synchronicity to describe these meaningful coincidences. None of this is intended to depict God as some master controller, sitting in a vast computer booth somewhere, arranging matches, throwing down thunderbolts, or otherwise meddling as he or she sees fit. Such an image reinforces a distant and rather threatening view of the God force. Rather, this view is of a very personal God, not separate from you or me. A God who is very active in our lives, not arbitrary. We can turn to the East for help with this concept of a living God. The Eastern religions see God in a non-anthropomorphic way, as the essential unity of all creation. The Creator is the living spirit behind every manifestation of the phenomenal world, not only the world of matter and energy, but the world of time as well. So the word for this all-pervasive essence is the Tao, meaning the proper flow, or the appropriate balance. In other words, God is a force that seeks harmony and balance. If we as free agents create imbalances in our lives, the harmonizing flow of God will bring us experiences that will help us regain our balance. Not because some master controller looks down from a cloud and says, uh-oh, shame on you, but because life, which is God, seeks balance, beauty, harmony. But God is more than just compensatory. In other words, God is not just counterbalancing your actions. The creative force has a plan, a design for every part of creation, including you. Because of this plan, life will bring to you just the experiences that you need to fully manifest your potential. Eastern philosophy puts it this way: when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Now the teacher may be a person or even a book or a movie. More often than not, it's a situation. God or life brings to you just what you need at the moment. In that way, every moment is an opportunity. The moment may bring an opportunity to correct an imbalance that you've created either consciously or unconsciously, or it may bring you an opportunity to manifest further your potential and purpose. Either case, God is interacting with you in a very intentional way. God cares about you and is working with you personally at every single moment of your life. God initiates relationships with you. God brings to you people, events, and experiences that will help you along the road of life. The accidents that last. There's a story of how a series of accidents, threaded, wove for one man the greatest treasures of his life. The story begins at a time when he's very confused, unhappy about his life. 1 year after graduating from college with a theater degree and subsequently breaking up with his girlfriend, he's pining away in a small Midwestern town, teaching 7th grade English. He's living by himself, upstairs apartment, miles away from friends, and even further away from any chance to live his dreams. One day, he took his 7th grade class on a field trip to his old college and just happened to run into a former classmate who shoved an address into his hand. "Write to this man," the friend said. "He's the head of the drama department at the university and is offering scholarships." The young man acted on the lead and was awarded an audition. Then, shortly before the appointed date for the audition, for no known reason, he chose to go home for lunch rather than stay at school, which was his usual custom. Sitting on a chair, eating an orange, heard the phone ring, answered it, heard the pleasant voice of a young woman who called from the university to alert him that there was a change in the audition date. There was a very pleasant conversation, and for days afterward he found himself trying to visualize her face. The audition came, and to his joy he was admitted to the program. For 2 years he studied with the best artists in the field. The woman whose voice he'd heard on the phone turned out to be a student also. After graduation they married, and in the following 15 years the two of them built a life together that was nourished in part of their mutual experience in the theater program. Thus, what had seemed to be a series of coincidences proved to have profound consequences in his life. Can you remember some event or encounter that seemed purely accidental, yet in time proved to be pivotal in your journey? This might have been seen as the hand of God operating within the sphere of life. God not only calls you by name, but opens doors and beckons you to go through them. Come with me, we have work to do. Here is an exercise for you. It's largely focused on expanding your perceptions and becoming aware of influences that usually go unnoticed. So try to become more observant of your inner and your outer worlds and watch for indications of a living, caring God, one that takes initiatives. You may experience this in a variety of ways, for example, accidental, coincidental, meetings and so on with people that help you or can help you, and on other occasions you may observe these initiatives as small, subtle signs. So pay special attention. Also, to any sleep experiences, dreams, patterns, a living, caring God may express guidance, either directly or symbolically through a dream. Then, as you recognize these initiatives from the spiritual world, try to be responsive and make practical use of them in the material world. What do they invite you to do? How are they showing you ways to be more sensitive, creative, or productive? End of page 32, Principle 3. Next video will be Principle 4. All is one and everything is connected.